Rowan Kessler hadn't set foot on his family's land in nearly a year. Not since the funeral. Not since the whispers. Not since everything inside him broke and silence became easier than people. But now he was back. And everything he remembered was different. His boots crunched down on the gravel road as the early spring sun filtered through the tall pines of Dead River Hollow. The mountains loomed silent, familiar. The air was cold, cleaner than anything he'd breathed in the city. Every breath hurt in that beautiful, quiet way, like coming home to a place that never stopped waiting. He stepped out of the truck slowly, eyes scanning the ridgeline above the stream. It was still there, the same bend in the trees where his father used to fish. The weathered wood post with their initials carved into it. R.K. and T.K. Rowan and his dad, back when the world felt solid. But something else caught his eye. Something that shouldn't be there. A road. Paved. New. Fresh tire tracks embedded in asphalt that cut through the pine underbrush like a scar. His stomach turned. There had never been a road there. Not on his land. He walked. Each step down the newly carved path deepened the unease in his chest. A few hundred feet later, the forest opened into a clearing he barely recognized. And there they stood. Cabins. 6 of them, wood-paneled, modern, stylish. One had floor-to-ceiling windows facing the valley, another a hot tub steaming on a private deck. Between them, manicured gravel trails, yoga platforms, solar lighting. In the center, a sign carved in cedar and framed with stone. Whisper Valley Wellness and Spa. Escape. Heal. Reconnect. Rowan stared at it, frozen. His hand reflexively went to the pocket where he used to keep his badge, even though that part of his life was long over. This wasn't some weird dream. It was real. They'd built a damn resort on his land. He walked farther, past a small parking lot with a luxury SUV bearing Oregon plates. Then he saw her. A woman in her early 40s, well-dressed in hiking chic layers, stood near one of the cabins speaking to a man holding a tablet. Her voice was confident, animated. Claire Durant. Rowan recognized her immediately. Her face had been plastered on brochures all over Montana last year. Founder of a holistic health startup that claimed to transform rural spaces into sanctuaries of healing. She glanced his way, paused, then smiled. "Can I help you?" she asked brightly. Rowan walked up slowly, eyes hard. "You're on private land," he said, voice low. She tilted her head, giving him a look like he was some confused hiker who had wandered too far. "This is Whisper Valley Retreat," she said gently. "The land is part of a shared development zone, purchased legally under Emergency Community Transition Guidelines approved by Mayor Holloway." Rowan blinked once. Mayor Trent Holloway, his father's old friend, a man who had shown up at the funeral, spoken about honor, and then disappeared. Claire continued, voice as smooth as polished stone. "There was a public process, notifications sent out. I assume you're not from around here." Rowan's hands clenched. "This land belonged to Thomas Kessler, my father. It was never for sale." She smiled wider, like a teacher explaining something to a difficult student. "According to county records, your father authorized a transitional rights agreement before his passing. The paperwork is fully registered. If you'd like to review it, we can set up a meeting with the development board." He stared at her, every instinct screaming. This wasn't some misunderstanding. It was theft, well-dressed, sugar-coated, legalized theft. "I'll be back," he said coldly. Claire nodded. "I'm sure you will." As he turned and walked away, a single thought echoed louder than the crunch of gravel under his boots. They think this land is empty because no one's here to fight for it. They're wrong. Rowan didn't sleep that night. He sat at the old kitchen table in his father's cabin, if you could still call it that after a year of dust, mildew, and silence, and flipped through what few papers he had left. The deed. The boundary maps. His father's handwritten notes. All of them marked the same thing. The land was his, 40 acres, undivided, untouched. Signed over to Rowan 5 years ago. Notarized, filed with the county registrar in Clearwater. And yet Claire Durant stood in his clearing, smiling like she'd bought paradise on discount. Rowan drove into town the next morning, Clearwater. Population vised to 900. The place hadn't changed much since he was a kid. Still the same diner, same barber shop, same courthouse with the peeling flag. But everything felt different now, quieter, like people were avoiding looking him in the eye. He headed straight for the county clerk's office, pushing open the worn wooden door with its faded hours of operation sticker. Behind the desk sat Martha Tilling, a woman who had known his father and served as registrar for over 2 decades. She looked up, startled. "Rowan?" she said, half rising from her chair. I heard you were back." "I need copies of every land transaction involving Parcel 147D in the last 2 years, he said. Her face tightened slightly. "You know I can't just hand those over. It's my land." She hesitated. "Not exactly. According to the records, there was a transfer filed last September." Rowan leaned forward, the temperature in his voice dropping. "Filed by who?" She fidgeted, opened a drawer, and pulled a thin folder. "It's complicated." He opened the file. There it was, a transitional stewardship transfer agreement, signed by Thomas Kessler, his father, dated 2 months before his death. It transferred stewardship rights, not ownership, but allowed development in the interest of community wellness and reinvestment. Rowan shook his head. "This is fake. My father couldn't even hold a pen that year." Martha didn't meet his eyes. "Who notarized this?" "Mayor Holloway's office." "Of course. Trent Holloway." Rowan snapped the folder shut. "I want to see the original documents. Not scans. Originals." Martha flinched. "There are no hard copies. Everything's digital now." "How convenient," he muttered. Back outside, the wind cut harder through the trees. Rowan sat in his truck, staring at the courthouse steps, rage simmering just beneath his skin. His father's land, carved up under the name of wellness. A fake signature, a smiling liar, and a town too scared or too complicit to question it. He drove by the mayor's office, didn't stop. Trent's black Escalade was parked out front. The license plate still read TRNT1, subtle as ever. Instead, he turned toward the only person who might still give a damn. Ben Ridley, an old friend of his father's, and once the town's top land surveyor before he retired. Ben's cabin sat on the far end of a ridge overlooking Dead River. The man answered the door with a cigarette in one hand and a thermos in the other. "Rowan," he said, eyebrows rising. "Figured I'd see you sooner or later." "I need your help." Ben didn't ask why, he just waved him in. Inside, surrounded by old maps and cluttered blueprints, Rowan laid it all out. Claire Durant, the spa, the phony transfer, Trent's signature on a notarized lie. Ben listened in silence, his jaw tightening with each new revelation. "Your father hated that woman," Ben said finally. "Said she was sniffing around ever since that development grant came through. I told him to lock the land tighter than a prison fence." Rowan leaned forward. "Can you verify the original boundaries?" Ben nodded slowly. "I've still got the markers. And the coordinates. No one's moved them in 20 years. "Then let's go find out." They hiked into the property that afternoon. Ben, with his old GPS unit and field maps, stopped at a rusted metal stake, half buried under moss. "Here," he said. "Boundary starts at this oak, runs east 600 feet to the stream, then north." Rowan followed the trail. Every marker matched. But when they reached the far ridge, the one where the new cabins now stood, Ben's face darkened. "They're inside your line," he said. "How far?" 60 yards, at least." Rowan stared out over the spa's wooden walkways, hot tubs and yoga platforms built on land where his father once taught him to shoot. "They're not just squatting," Rowan said coldly. "They knew exactly what they were doing." The next morning, Rowan returned to his cabin with a plan. He wasn't a cop anymore. He didn't have a badge or subpoena power. But what he did have was memory, and one hell of an instinct for where people like to hide their messes. He needed hard evidence, something more than his word versus theirs. And he had a feeling his father left him more than just a broken deed and a dying forest. The place to start was the old workshop. Thomas Kessler had built it behind the cabin when Rowan was a boy, part shed, part sanctuary. His father had always said, "The truth should be kept where liars are least likely to look buried in work." Rowan sifted through drawers of rusted tools, coffee cans filled with nails, brittle paper manuals yellowed with age. Hours passed. Then he found it. Behind a false panel in the back wall, wedged between insulation and dry rot, was a military-style lockbox. Inside, a notarized copy of the original deed, unblemished and untouched, a small voice recorder with a cracked screen, and a handwritten letter dated 6 months before his father's death. Rowan unfolded the letter carefully. "If you're reading this, I'm gone. Don't believe Trent. He's not who you think. Claire came to me with a proposal. She called it healing, but it smelled like money. Big money. I said no. I always will. If they ever say I gave them this land, they're lying. Protect it. It's yours now." The words hit harder than Rowan expected, not just because of the betrayal, but because he could hear his father's voice in every sentence. Firm, quiet, defiant. He pressed play on the recorder. The static gave way to his father's voice, slow, deliberate, and tired. "Claire showed me a draft contract today. Said it would bring tourists, jobs. I told her hell no. She left angry. Trent stopped by 2 days later. Said if I didn't cooperate, the county would declare the land underutilized and seize it under public access codes. I told him I'd bury him before I signed anything." Rowan's fist clenched. This wasn't just corruption. It was coercion. That afternoon, he met again with Ben Ridley, the retired surveyor, and showed him the documents. Ben whistled low. "You've got 'em cornered, but they'll deny, delay, distract. You ready for a war?" Rowan nodded. They picked the wrong piece of dirt. They scanned the deed, photos of the boundary markers, GPS logs, and the audio clip. Ben knew a young intern at the Montana Land Rights Alliance, an advocacy group known for defending rural property owners. Within hours, Rowan's case was escalated to a pro bono legal team in Missoula. By sundown, Rowan had something he hadn't felt in weeks: momentum. But the other side wasn't asleep. That night, as Rowan returned from town with groceries, he noticed something strange. His trail cams were gone. All of them. Cut clean from the trees. Gone without a trace. He scanned the woods, heart pounding, flashlight beam darting between trunks. That wasn't all. At his doorstep lay a single piece of paper. No envelope. Just a short message printed in block font. "Let it go, or we bury you too." Rowan didn't sleep. He sat in the dark, shotgun across his lap, staring into the woods. He'd seen this kind of warning before, back when he wore a badge and chased traffickers who didn't like being seen. But this wasn't war-torn foreign soil. This was Montana, his land. And someone just crossed a line. The next day, he drove to Missoula to meet Elena Ruiz, the lead attorney assigned to his case. She was sharp, direct, and clearly impressed by the evidence. "Normally, cases like this take months just to build traction," she said. "You've already done half my job." "I don't want money," Rowan told her. "I want the land cleared. I want the lies buried. And I want their names on a criminal docket." She smiled grimly. "Let's start with the lies then." Together, they filed a cease and desist order and prepared a civil suit against Claire Durant and Trent Holloway for illegal occupation, fraudulent transfer, and property interference. Elena also filed a request for injunctive relief, which, if granted, would halt all business operations on the land immediately. "Best case," Elena said, flipping through the documents, "we get a judge to freeze their development. Worst case, they dig in and this turns very public." Rowan leaned back, eyes cold. Let's make it public. The cease and desist order landed like a grenade. Within 48 hours, Whisper Valley Retreat was forced to suspend all operations. Reservations were canceled, contractors left, spa sessions halted. The cabins, once bustling with silent luxury, stood quiet under gray Montana skies. And then, the counterattack came. A letter legal, polished, and venomous arrived from Claire Durant's attorneys. She wasn't just denying the allegations. She was accusing Rowan of harassment, of creating an unsafe environment, and, most dangerously, of exhibiting behavior consistent with post-traumatic stress and emotional instability. A subtle play, but a smart one. Claire was painting him not as a hero, but a threat. Rowan read the words slowly, feeling the heat rise in his chest. Unstable, dangerous, aggressive. He'd heard those words before, after the incident that ended his law enforcement career, after the time he snapped at a superior officer in Afghanistan, after the time he buried his wife and son without saying a word. He knew what they were doing. They weren't just trying to beat him. They were trying to erase him. What came next hit harder. The Clearwater Gazette, a paper once owned by his uncle, published an editorial. A man who abandoned his land returns and sues the town for progress? Is Rowan Kessler protecting a legacy or standing in the way of healing? Trent Holloway had clearly called in every favor he had left. In the comments section, anonymous users mocked Rowan, called him paranoid. A nutcase with a gun and a grudge. One post simply read, "Bet he's not done burying bodies." Rowan stared at the screen until the words blurred. He shut his laptop, walked outside, stood at the tree line, and looked toward the cabins. The quiet wasn't peace anymore. It was smothering. That night, a rock crashed through his window. No note, no sound, just silence and shattered glass. He didn't call the sheriff. He didn't expect help. Instead, he sat by the broken window, shotgun across his lap, and whispered to the cold, "You picked the wrong man." Well, the next morning, he met with Elena Ruiz, his attorney. She was already on edge. "They've filed a motion to invalidate your claim," she said, pushing papers across the table. "They're saying your father wasn't of sound mind when he signed over the deed." Rowan's jaw clenched. He was sharper than I am now. "They're also pushing for a psychological evaluation. They want to make this about you, not the land. You." Rowan leaned forward, eyes dead serious. "Then we make it about them." Rowan and Elena launched the counteroffensive. They released a curated version of the audio recordings. Not the whole file, just the part where his father explicitly stated, "I will never sign that land over. I don't care what Trent says. They can burn the trees before they get it." The clip hit local news like wildfire.